Okay, welcome to week 9 of Whiteboard Wednesday. I'm going to continue the theme today with this notion of high performance with high integrity. Last week I had the opportunity, whilst talking to the mates of Melbourne, to give you a bit of a look at the overall framework and where it all actually comes together. But there's one critical component of this, which is perhaps the least intuitive part of what the high performance, high integrity thing is all about, is this notion of community. And I thought, having everyone had the experience on Friday night of the Pink Lady and the Field of Women live, that everyone would have a really strong understanding now of just what football clubs and football coming together can actually bring at a pure community level. In this case, with one of these, one of the finest charitable organisations I've been involved with the Breast Cancer Network Australia, who did some amazing work, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But the notion of integrity as it relates to community is an interesting one, and a lot of it is, it's almost this circular notion, if you like, and I'll talk about that as well in a moment. The first part of it, if you like, is that traditionally football clubs have had a fairly obvious community focus, and in most cases their whole evolution and development came out of community, and community as it related to a suburb or a group of people, and in our case a ground. As the Melbourne Cricket Club was being or evolving and developing, it was some 20 years old when the Melbourne Footy Club was actually formed. But again, it came out of a sense of community. Perhaps over time, as we've rationalised grounds and we've created new teams, and a few of these notions of community have become a little bit or a little less obvious, and in some cases, football clubs over time, as they've become more professional, we went through this phase probably in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the first part of this century, where there was this homogenisation of AFL clubs, and there was a certain sameness about them. And I think what's happened in recent times is clubs have actually looked to assert their own personality on the competition, and that's certainly one of the things that we're looking to do ourselves. That there's this historical richness in our sense of community, which is perhaps a little bit different to the next club, and every club has its own idiosyncrasies, which we're very keen to evolve and develop. So there's this historical aspect of it, and that in some ways then relates to your brand, over time, that a lot of the brands of the AFL club have got very much their own personality, which in many ways can be traced back to their own community roots. So we take that aspect of it very seriously as we seek to build our club. The next notion of this is this one of this personal development responsibility that we have, that we employ a lot of young people in and around our club, and you've heard me talk about this in the past, particularly the player group, where we take them out of their environment, often away from their home environment and away from many of the normal development experiences that they're going to have, even within the context of their own family, and we take them on this sort of rocket ride of development at one level, where they're exposed to experiences and pressures and challenges and all these sorts of things, particularly as athletes, that they wouldn't have had they not had that opportunity. But at the same time, they leave behind many of the personal development experiences which are so fundamental to young people as they find their way in the world. So we look at some of the opportunities that we can provide our players at a community level as a means of, at least in part, filling that gap, that it brings them back to reality in lots of ways. There's a bit of rock stardom, as I've said before, about being an AFL player in today's environment. So how do we bring back some of the experiences that they need to have in regard to that, and we do that through the very much a personalised involvement of players in various community activities of which they can relate to in one way or another. And in some cases they become quite obvious. We've got, for instance, a number of our Indigenous lads, and we've made a number of recent announcements about initiatives that the club's being involved in, particularly in the communities with the trachoma disease, this eye disease, which is a terrible blight on these communities, but also a very bad, if you like, bad for our country, and this very developed. We're the only developed country in the world where trachoma is still a disease which has a major impact. So we can do our bit to try and rid the world, or rid Australia of this disease, which is a very preventable thing. We've got Aaron Davey and Liam Jarrah who are heading this up and are going to be the faces of the program. And this thing's a preventable disease, but it's also got government funding of which we can actually help. We can help them with what they do in regard to the money that they're actually spending in that regard. So there's very much a personal development aspect to it in terms of the players. But we also challenge the players by saying that at this stage of your life, you're given the opportunity now to do more positive work in the community than perhaps they're ever going to have at any other stage of their life. And the reality for them is a 21 or a 22-year-old can have more impact at a community level than most of us would ever dream of, even at the sort of the prime of our careers. That a 22-year-old young man walking into a hostel or a hospital or doing a reading program for young children will have much more impact than if he had not been an AFL player. And so players need to learn how they can express themselves in the context of their community whilst giving themselves that development, and they need to take it seriously. So there's nothing tokenistic about it. So it's actually seen as something of which they can make this impact with, help themselves as part of it all, but also feel good in regard to their own self-esteem. And all of these elements all come into play. The other thing it does, though, it creates for us this sense of club as well, and in doing so, we've got this, like most organisations have this, and I don't necessarily like this notion of corporate social responsibility. It's become a bit of a buzzword of the last, or phrase of the last 6, 7 or 8 years, but it's got to go beyond that. This notion of responsibility, as in you make money, you do this, you play AFL footy, you're expected to do that. Well, all of that, it's almost a punitive way of approaching what I see as community. For me, again, comes back to that personal development experience. If we can bring people through our organisation who understand and really know what they can actually give, they'll end up having this very much this circular nature of their own sense of community, that they know that if by giving at this level they get back at that level in regard to their own self-esteem and the development experiences that have been created as a result of that. Well, that's a very powerful thing for them to be involved in. And if we can create as a club that sort of environment, well, that's a great thing.